all of you. Our chief guest, Ambassador Anil Trigunayev ji, former ambassador of India to Jordan, Libya, and Malta. All my colleagues who have joined this webinar, and guests and friends. First of all, I would like to greet all of you on this special occasion when we are celebrating the SAARC Day. Like in past, we have been celebrating this day and making an attempt to make people aware. Those who do not know much about SAARC, attempt is made, particularly when we were doing this program offline, normal physical mode. That time we would invite students also so that they know more about SAARC. I think today also some students have joined, but online. South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, which is acronymed as SAARC, is the regional intergovernmental organization and geopolitical union of states in South Asia. Its member states are Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Today it has got 8 members. These are these 8 member countries. But when it started on 8th of December 1985, that time it had 7 members only. Afghanistan was not a member at that time. See, I am almost associated with SAARC almost from the beginning, because in management discipline, I belong to the management discipline. We had established one association of management development institutions in South Asia in 1988, which is acronymed as MDSA. MDSA was recognized by SAARC as an official organ of business schools in South Asian countries. Therefore, I had the opportunity to visit all the 7 countries to participate and chair various sessions in the management forums. Because by rotation, this forum was organized. That time, since Afghanistan was not there, Afghanistan joined later in 2005. So I could not get the opportunity to join, to visit Afghanistan. But these 7 countries I visited and had the opportunity to know about the culture of these 7 countries. I had also the opportunity in around, I think, 1998, 99, to supervise a PhD scholar on the impact of SAARC on trade in the selected South Asian countries. She received PhD in 2001, and now she's a professor in IIM Kashipur. SAARC comprises 3% of the world's area. If we look into it in terms of area, it comprises 3% of world's area. 21% of the world's production, and 4.21% of the global economy as of 2019. Since 2020-21 figures are not available, up to 2019, this was the statistics. You see, 4.21% of the global economy meant 3.67 trillion US dollars. SAARC was founded in Dhaka on 8th December 1985. I also remember this date because of my personal reasons. My son was born on 6th of December 1985. 2 days later, SAARC was born. Its secretary is based in Kathmandu, Nepal. In fact, when this MDSA started, it started from Kathmandu, Nepal. MDSA, that is what I'm referring to, Association of Management Development Institutions in South Asia. The organization, that is SAARC, promotes development of economic and regional integration. It launched the South Asian Free Trade Area in 2006. SAARC maintains permanent diplomatic relations at the United Nations as an observer and has developed links with multilateral entities, including the European Union. The idea of cooperation among South Asian countries did not appear all of a sudden. It is not that, well, when in 1985 it was established, it didn't just happen like that. There is a historical background. This issue was discussed in 3 conferences: the Asian Relations Conference held in New Delhi in April 1947. People have been talking about it since 47. The Baguio Conference in the Philippines in May 1950, and the Colombo Powers Conference held in Sri Lanka in April 1954. People have been talking about it, but finally it took shape much later. In the ending years of 1970s, the 7 inner, as I mentioned, when it started with 7 nations. Afghanistan was not there at that time. The 7 inner South Asian nations that included Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. These 7 nations agreed upon the creation of a trade bloc and to provide a platform for the people of South Asia to work together in a spirit of friendship, trust, and understanding. You see, President Ziaur Rahman at that time of Bangladesh, he played a very important role. He later addressed in the late 1970s, he addressed official letters to the leaders of the countries of the South Asia, presenting his vision for the future of the region and the compelling arguments for region. During his visit to India in December 1977, Rahman discussed the issue of regional cooperation with the then Prime Minister of the country, India, Morarji Desai. In the inaugural speech to the Colombo Plan Consultative Committee, which met in Kathmandu also in 1977, same year, King Virendra of Nepal gave a call for close regional cooperation among South Asian countries in sharing river waters. So a number of issues related to these countries, 7 sisters and now 8 sisters, they were raised and they were dealt in SAARC. So it has its own importance. And since we are part of the SAARC right from the beginning, a member nation, this is an important body for us also as Indians. So I once again greet you on this special day, and I'm very happy to welcome once again our chief guest, Anil Turgunayatji, who is the right person to enlighten us more about the role of SAARC and more importantly about the future of SAARC. Well, many institutions, many organizations are created. They grow over the period of time, but then at the same time, future is also important. What would make it more effective and relevant during the times to come? Today, across the world, we are talking about sustainable development. United Nations has set 17 sustainable development goals. And if we link role of SAARC in ensuring the achievement of sustainable development goals, how would it work? Will SAARC be able to play any role during the times to come? These are some of the questions which need to be addressed, and our chief guest is the right person. He is the former Indian Foreign Service. He has done IFS earlier and has been ambassador of India to many countries. So we will be very happy to listen to him and increase our knowledge about SAARC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words of wisdom. We are happy to have Ambassador Anil Trigunathji, an Indian Foreign Service, former Ambassador of India to Jordan, Libya, and Malta. Now I request Sri Hemant Sharma, Co-Coordinator Cultural and Literary Committee, to introduce our chief guest to the audience. Over to you, sir.
Good morning once again. I am feeling honored to read a brief profile of our respected chief guests today. As a career diplomat, Ambassador Sri Anil Trigunath has served in the Indian mission in Cote d'Ivoire, Bangladesh, Mongolia, USA, Russia, Sweden, and Nigeria. He served in Moscow as Deputy Chief of Mission in the rank of Ambassador. He was also India's Ambassador to Libya, Jordan, and High Commissioner to Malta. He superannuated in 2016. He is a postgraduate in physics from the Agra Kumaon University and studied Russian history, culture, and language at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. As a visiting fellow, he conducted research work on World Trade Organization and regional trading blocks at the Oxford University. He is a regular contributor and commentator on foreign and economic policy and education and interfaith dialogue related issues. West Asia, Africa, and Russia, and managing India's interest in conflict zones are his special areas of interest. He is associated with several think tanks and chambers of commerce. He has published papers in books and periodicals. Ambassador Trigunath is a distinguished fellow and head of West Asia Experts Group at the Vivekanand International Foundation, member of Governing Council, Raisina House and USA NAS Foundation, India Forum for Public Diplomacy, Future Billionaire International Network, and the India-Japan Foundation. He is also visiting fellow and advisor at the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs and Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. He is also the secretary of Association of Indian Diplomats, an organization of former Ambassador Group. Presently, Ambassador Trigunath is the president of Millennial India International Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. Recently joined the International Advisory Council of the Confederation of Indian Industries, CII. He is also on the board of advisors of BRICS Chamber of Commerce and Asia Africa Chamber of Commerce as well. As honorary member, International Trade Council, Brussels. Recently, he has joined the National Cooperatives Development Corporation as advisor, international, and as co-president of UDMRD.org. He is also member of All India Management Association, DMA, Oxford Cambridge Society of India, and serves on the board of advisors at Peaceful Mind Foundation as well. As Confederation of Education Excellence, New Delhi. As a peace ambassador, Mr. Trigunath is closely associated with with the interfaith dialogue, peace and harmony efforts in the society, especially through the Unity Dialogue by www.unity.earth and World Congress of Religions, Kazakhstan. Ambassador Tirgunath knows French, Russian, and Spanish language. Today, it is a great pleasure for us that he is with us for delivering his keynote address. So now, without taking much time, I would like to request respected Anil Tirgunath sir, our chief guest on the occasion, please address the audience.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. Namaste. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Upinder Dharji, Mr. Preman Sharma ji, Coordinator, Mr. Vardhi ji, and Mr. Kulkarni of the Cultural and Literary Committee of the prestigious Shri Vaishnav Vidyapeeth Vishwavidyalaya, esteemed faculty, and dear students. I'm indeed very grateful for this kind invitation to celebrate SAARC Day with you and at your prestigious institution, which aims at high and meaningful learning. Let me also felicitate you not only on the SAARC Day, but also on being in a city, Indore, that has again been nominated as the cleanest city in India for the 5th time, according to the Swachh Sarvekshan. I also look forward to visiting your beautiful and historic city. I don't see I can add much as Professor Dhar, who has been very much involved in the evolution of SAARC, in the institutions of SAARC, and has seen how the 7-8 countries tried to emerge into some kind of a grouping, because European Union at one time was the gold standard for regional collaboration and cooperation. And that provided a great incentive to very many countries. But not all the groupings like this have been as successful. And even the European Union, as you all know, has its own challenges. We have recently seen Brexit. So as Professor Dhar has already laid out a great canvas about the aims, objectives, and the achievements of SAARC in different areas, I would try to focus a bit on how India is playing that role and how SAARC remains relevant or is becoming less relevant. And what is the kind of dynamic that is playing around that has really stunted its growth from the times that it was imagined to become really an engine for growth for South Asia, which faces very similar problems, has similar historical issues, and has affinities, cultural affinities with one another. Despite that, we see in South Asia, there have been all kinds of problems. So I'll try to work on that. As for me, I came on my second diplomatic assignment to Bangladesh in January 1986, after about a couple of months of the launch of SAARC. Of course, the Bangladeshis were euphoric about it because it was something that was coming from them at that time when Bangladesh was still has not taken into grips. And we had generals still ruling there, whether it was General Ziaur Rahman or General Irshad, even though some kind of elections were held there. So the Bangladesh was treated as an LDC, and just only last week we have seen that Bangladesh has come out of the list of the LDCs and is doing pretty well, I must say, in the last few years in the region. And for that matter, even Sri Lanka and several other countries have better indices, even in certain cases better than India in sometimes. But India is actually the engine of growth in the region, an engine of its success, basically, if it happens. But at the same time, we also have a very powerful dragging force, and that dragging force, unfortunately, happens to be Pakistan. Now, what we are going to discuss is an important topic. It is something that needs to be looked at. What are the failures that could be addressed? because it is a very important and strategic region in the world, despite the fact that our land mass or land area is not that big. But at the same time, it houses the third largest economy in the world, which is India. It has several fast-growing economies like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, which are doing reasonably well. It also has become an area of contestation between India and China to some extent, because India has its boundaries with all these countries, and so does China with some of them. So we have that kind of competition that has started emerging in the region, which is also acting as a deterrent on it becoming or achieving or acquiring its status as a successful regional bloc. How far can it go is something that only time can tell. But for last several years, we have seen that because of Pakistan, India, contradicting issues that are there between these two countries have generally held back certain progress, because Pakistan has been following a policy which is using cross-border terrorism as an instrument of its foreign policy against India. And as long as that continues to be the thing, it becomes increasingly difficult for India to be a part of the initiatives that are there and think that business as usual can go on. And that is not possible, because in today's time and age, we have seen that terrorism has emerged as the major challenge for the whole world, even though countries continue to remain selective in their approach as far as terrorism itself is concerned. Now, when we are talking today, you can also look at what is happening. We have seen that Afghanistan, which is the 8th member, as Professor Dhar mentioned, and an important member, has fallen prey to a radically driven Taliban in the region, and which is causing a major concern. Once again, terrorism is on the forefront of emergence of Taliban in the region, and it is supported by Pakistan to a great extent, as all of us know. So in that context, I personally find it a little bit difficult for things to move forward within the current format of SAARC. But then all is not lost, as we know. The SAARC has acquired much more, achieved quite a lot of, I would say, integration, as was mentioned about the SAFTA, the trade agreement, and India follows a policy which is a non-reciprocal policy as far as all the members of the country, whether it is a part of its neighborhood first policy or it is a part of the SAARC as an institution by itself. So both in the bilateral context, in the sub-regional context, and in the regional context, India has been following mainly this policy of, I would say, giving much more than it expects in return. You must have heard about Gujarat Doctrine. I mean, that is what had really started. But despite that, we have had other problems. And our problems come because of the various geopolitical contestations that take place here. China following a policy of a string of pearls strategy. So when you are looking at them taking over the ports in Bangladesh or ports in Sri Lanka or in Maldives, we are fighting, or for that matter, trying to defeat India's goodwill in Afghanistan. So we see that the Sino-Pak axis is started working in a negative direction as far as the regional cohesion is concerned from India's point of view. So that's very important. The last meeting that was held of the foreign ministers, SAARC foreign ministers, we have seen was on the sidelines of the UN. As you mentioned, that SAARC is accredited to the UN also. And it was in 2019. So India has also said that it was, at that meeting, I remember, it was said that SAARC is a story of missed opportunities, but also of deliberate obstacles. And terrorism is one of them. An elimination of terrorism in all its forms is a precondition not only for fruitful cooperation, but also for its very survival of these countries and the whole region itself. But despite that, whatever challenges confront us in the times of need, whether it is disasters, whether it is pandemics, we have seen that countries of the region have risen to the occasion, and that gives you the hope. And let me recount a few recent initiatives that are current and are followed through as a result of India's initiatives. Now, you may remember that during this pandemic, we are undergoing certain new viral strains have come about. So it is not over. But as we all know that the virus or disasters really do not know boundaries. So if something happens somewhere, it also happens in the other country and globally in that sense, but more so in the regional context when we say that. So what India did was, I mean, you remember 2014, Prime Minister Modi in his Neighborhood First policy invited all the leaders, including Pakistan's Nawaz Sharif, had come there. So it looked, hope was there at that time. But unfortunately, the bigger incidents that happened and the way Pakistan has continued to behave, we have seen that this has not moved forward the way it should have been. But coming back to the pandemic, which is what, because I want to also focus a little bit on positive dimensions of it. The positive dimension, in my view, is that there was a video conference of SAARC leaders that were happening. All the leaders happened. Pakistan advisor to Prime Minister on health also joined it, that conference. And this was decided that SAARC needs to fight the pandemic together. And this was an unprecedented challenge. And we had seen what happened. So India created a COVID-19 emergency fund and initially gave $10 million. How it was being operated, Pakistan deferred, but at the same time, it did exist. So SAARC Secretariat eventually became the nodal point for this. Then humanitarian relief was immediately supplied to all the countries, including to Pakistan, by India, supply of essential drugs, antibiotics, medical consumables. So these are all our testing kits for that matter. Then the SAARC Disaster Management Center, which works, I think, in Gujarat and Gandhinagar. Now there also, all the SAARC countries, it's temporary, but it is working there. India had also launched its SAARC satellite, actually. Pakistan did not become a member of that, but as per its promise for making all the countries benefit from the technology, because that's where we are going to go forward. So therefore, whether in ICT, whether in artificial intelligence, or whether fighting the pandemic, or doing the research together, or education together, or travel, trade, everything, all these require a certain kind of a management. And that requires all countries to be broadly on the same page, even if they are not together. Now, another thing was that, again, after about 1 year, I guess, there was another video conference that was organized in April, in which it was the Prime Minister spoke of several things, and he wanted to talk about what are the travel restrictions even for the health officials, and how the intra-regional trade was being impacted. So the ministers started meeting, and then we see that there is a little bit of a movement on low-hanging fruits, I would say, not necessarily on the key issues. And then it was a SAARC COVID-19 information exchange platform was developed, in which all the countries can work together. India, as you know, has something called ITEC program, which is Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, that has been going on since 1964, under which we provide assistance to about 161 countries in capacity building, and mostly free to those countries through scholarships. So then ITEC network was evolved. Healthcare system on the telemedicine and others, these were involved. Healthcare personnel were trained. And we are seeing that AIIMS and the PGI Chandigarh and all that have been part of this thing. We know that South Asia is not uniform, as we know. We have smallest countries like island countries like Maldives, to an India, which is of continental proportions as its members. And its independent history of about 6-7 decades, we are seeing that while we see on the one hand, the largest democracy in India functioning, we have also seen kingdoms in Bhutan and Nepal, and including the political upheavals through frequent coups d'etats in some countries, as well as the resurgence of democratic communism in Nepal, and now resurgence of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. So multiple types of political institutions are there. When you have people from dictatorship to democracy in a certain grouping, it has its own negativity inherent in it as far as regional cooperation is concerned. Of course, it provides them a platform to each one. And hopefully the bilateral issues are not discussed in that. That is the basic remit of SAARC or any regional organization, is that regional issues will be discussed. On top of it, two of the countries, India and Pakistan, are nuclear countries, nuclear powers in the region. Leave aside China, which is the bigger nuclear power, and the threat today to rest of the world in that sense of the term, the way its growth is happening. And its major objective, and let me touch base on China for a minute, even though it is a neighbor of most of these countries, its major objective is to keep India ensconced well within the South Asian landscape and not become a regional or a global power in that sense. So that's what it is trying to do for India, whether through Pakistan or through Afghanistan or through Sri Lanka or Nepal or whatever you might say. So we are seeing that this is a why I'm saying so is that because this is a complicated issues. And if it is combined with extremism and terrorism, it makes a very, very difficult kind of issue. But on the other hand, if you see that most of the countries in the region have tremendous prevalence of poverty, underdevelopment, deep-seated socio-political divisions, and occasional territorial disputes in the region, outside, and they are the major challenges for these countries. So you mentioned about SDGs, and SDGs have already been going behind schedule, more so now because of the way the pandemic has impacted the economies in the country. But at the same time, we are also facing the problem of commitment of the countries in many ways. So as a SAARC, as a unit, could have done much more. There are projects, there are issues, there are assistance provided for various kinds of initiatives by various countries in the thing. But we continue to have that issue, which will take time, in my view. And you know, now today, Pakistan is on the brink of financial disaster. And everybody knows it, that they are having major problems. But if it was not spending so much money on countering India all the time, or beefing up its security, or supporting the terrorist groups, it would have been in a much better place than otherwise. And even then, if our connectivity is such an important issue, Afghanistan is facing humanitarian disaster of an unprecedented kind. 90% of the people don't have food. When India finally decided to say to send 50,000 tons of wheat via Pakistan, Pakistan refused. It was only last month when there was a meeting of the Troika Plus, and the Afghan government pressed Pakistan that we want the Indian wheat to come through, that they relented. So these kind of bilateral issues and the problems obviously tend to create not only problem for the bilateral relations, trilateral relations, but at the same time also for the regional connectivity and the regional growth and smoother functioning of regional institutions altogether. So this is something that we are facing today. And that is the kind of thing. So what options India took in the meantime in this SAARC? When you know that there is a toxicity about a certain relationship that is not allowing you to move forward, anything, whether any project you take, whether it was the transportation networks, whether it was vehicle movement traffic, whether it was border changes, whether it is free movement of the personnel, whether it is satellite, whether it is pandemic fight, when a country takes a view that defeats the collective, in a sense, that this is what causes a major problem for the whole bloc as it is. And therefore, countries like India, what do? They try to work with the countries, other countries that are willing to work with them. So India evolved its neighborhood first policy, then it evolved its Act East policy, and then they tried to combine the two in something called BIMSTEC, so that the connectivity to East Asia through its northeast borders can be ensured to a great extent. Of course, Myanmar is currently a problem, so we'll have to see how it moves. At the same time, it also, with few countries in the region, BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, try to create a smaller group in that. So sub-regional cooperation is going. India's feeling is that while the SAARC acquires its maturity and Pakistan comes on board, at least through these sub-regional cooperations, we can continue to strengthen the linkages and dependencies on various partners. Of course, this is in the regional context, but at the same time, India also follows a separate neighborhood first policy, and it tries to to provide assistance to all the countries because we feel that there is a common destiny. And India's basic foreign policy has been that a stronger neighbor, including a stronger Pakistan, is in India's interest, economically stronger Pakistan. And therefore, our common destiny basically is like the food security, health, poverty, alleviation, climate change, disaster management, women empowerment, and economic development. So all these are common issues that all of us face, and all of us have to work together in order to do that. So India has provided duty-free access to these countries on a unilateral basis to most of them. And LDC countries, obviously, there were earlier 5, 6 of them. Now we say 4 of them are remaining because 2 countries have been moved out of LDC. But still, they are being provided duty-free access to the India market. Now, another issue that with all these countries, now I have talked from India's perspective. Look at the perspective of these countries. How do they look at India? Well, they look at India as a giant. 75% of the land, population, army, you may say its economy, the largest economy in the region, and has the possibility of, riding over them. And that is the reason that they also are looking to leverage this on a bilateral basis, bringing in China into the fold. And that adds to India's challenges. At the same time, it provides it a potential for innovating new practices, new ways of engaging these countries. I am a firm believer that we have to have a non-reciprocal and a long-term relationship and a long-term objective to keep these countries together. Because China today has a very different approach. It may not be the same in the same position tomorrow. Many countries are feeling the brunt of debt diplomacy. They are being indebted. Their ports are being taken. The roads are taken, whether in SAARC region or outside. But at the same time, I also believe that we need not be very happy about China's failings. We need to work on our own successes, our own the way we look at the region is extremely important. And I'm happy that India is trying to develop that. You know that today, as we talk, India's foreign secretary is in Bangladesh. We are celebrating 50th anniversary this year, and their president is going to come. Sheikh Hasina will be in India soon, and our president will be going a month later to Bangladesh. So at the highest level, and India has given billions of dollars in bilateral assistance and also through the SAARC mechanisms. So when we assume these asymmetric responsibility, I personally feel that we need to lead from the front, because they do expect India to take greater role, play greater part, be more benign in the sense. Sometimes we tend to be carried away by political considerations, as happened, with Bangladesh, with Nepal, when the blockade happened. So we need to be careful. At the same time, work on the SAARC as a unit to the extent possible, because the big ticket items can only be achieved if all the 8 countries are on board. Today, at least 2 countries, we don't know which way they will go. We are not aware of their dispensations. Pakistan plays a zero-sum game in every bilaterally, in region and internationally. And as long as that continues, we will have to wait for the things to move forward. In the meantime, I think that India remains committed to SAARC. That is a fact. And that has been said by Prime Minister. If you see his speeches, you will find. But then various dichotomies and paradoxes and conflicts among the members will have to be contended with greater vigor, in my view, and with novel ideas and novel approaches. Then only we will be able to deal with these kind of issues. I'll rest here and I'll be very happy to answer specific questions. Thank you once again for your kind invitation. It's been a great pleasure being with you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening session. Now I request from the audience and dignitaries to present here that if you have any questions in your mind, then please feel free to write in question answer chat box. If any questions from the panelist side, then they can also unmute themselves and ask their questions.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Sir, as you talked about terrorism, so we all have seen, what happened in Afghanistan. So why countries like India or many other powerful countries like USA, they are so passive about this action? Why? Is there any reason?
Well, nobody is passive. I mean, if you know, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, even though currently after 1947, we don't have borders with Afghanistan directly, but India's history of relationship with Afghanistan is age-old. I mean, as you know, the Pathans coming from there was the gold standards of honesty, and they loved India. They like India. Even at the grassroots level, despite Taliban being there, I can assure you that if at all there is another poll in the country, India will still be the most popular nation in the world, not in Afghanistan, not because just because of the history, but because in the past 20 years, after Taliban was moved, and then the American forces came in there and they tried their stunts in the geopolitical sense, India has been actively engaged in rebuilding of Afghanistan, in its capacity building, in its institution building, in providing its more than $3 billion of assistance. Thousands and thousands of scholarships are given to Afghans even today. So Taliban is one country whose philosophy a group whose philosophy India did not agree with. They also considered last time India as an enemy. They tried to, with Pakistan, created much more terrorist acts and problem in India. So obviously that is a major concern for us. But why America, you said, is not passive. America actively sought Taliban and undermined the government that they have been so far supporting, whether it's of Ashraf Ghani or whether Karzai or any governments before, and which they said are elected governments. So when the US was fed up by coming into this war in the first place, in my view, that was a wrong war. They should not have gone in there. But when they went in there, they got sucked into it. And not only into that, when they came in 2001 after 9/11 into Afghanistan, in 2003, they went into Iraq, another intervention. And both these interventions actually, in my view, created greater terrorism and extremism and radicalization across the world. And all of us are suffering out of those. So Americans signed this agreement. In the first place, if you see the history, the Americans, Saudis, and Pakistan, they created mujahideens to fight against the Soviets in 1978 onwards. And this funding was done by the Americans, training by the Pakistan, Al-Qaeda, and all those organizations were created. And now what happens in February last year, that Americans signed an agreement with Taliban, that the power will be handed over to them. They will become part of this. Of course, I mean, if you find, they were calling them the terrorist groups. There are many of them which are listed UN terrorists. And when you sign an agreement, you legitimize them. And that's where problem for India also began. India had to leave that because Taliban, obviously there was a feeling that Taliban, even though you say today the Taliban is changed, but how much can they change in their ideological dispensation is anybody's guess. They cannot, because that is their way of asserting power in the region or in the country. The only good thing about Taliban is that Taliban looks only as the Islamic Emirate within Afghanistan. It does not look to go beyond. So what is India doing now? We have been in the United Security Council. We have flagged the issues. Red lines have been created for Taliban. It has not yet been recognized by any country, even though Russians, the Chinese, the Pakistanis, and US and everybody is dealing with them. So is India. I mean, we have started meeting with them because, see, the feeling today is that it's a fait accompli, that Taliban is in power at there. The only other option is that if Taliban is removed somehow, you will have the ISIS, the Al-Qaedas, which will be far more worse for the region and for the countries, and more so for India, because they don't agree with India's democratic credentials and the approaches. And Kashmir issues they bring out all the time. Islamic issues they bring out all the time. So I think that India is doing the right thing. We have been the greatest provider of disaster assistance. We are the providers of the major relief material. And personally, I feel that we should have continued to provide the humanitarian assistance to Afghan people immediately after Taliban took over and they were in trouble, without recognizing them, without establishing diplomatic relations with them, or, but for the people, because that is what gives you the ground swell of support, that India stands with the people of Afghanistan. That is what is more important. Parties, politics, they keep coming and going, but it is the people who eventually stand for you. And that's what is more important. Of course, Pakistan factor played on the mind of Indian policymakers. But at the same time, I think that as a large country, as a power, regional power, it is our duty. So terrorism is an international problem. It's a global problem. Now, the fighting Americans have been, some people say, though, India can go and bomb the place. This is stupid. Americans have been there. The most powerful country in the world has been there 20 years. If you don't read history, you make mistakes again and again. Russian, Soviet Union was one of the most powerful countries. They lost the battle. The Britishers had lost when they were an empire. They could never rule Afghanistan. So one has to understand what is the terrain, what kind of people, what kind of tribal affiliations are there. If you don't understand that, then you cannot be a partner or dictate terms to them. So that has been the biggest challenge. And today we are facing, and hopefully the Taliban, it promises that it will not allow terrorism to go out of its borders. I doubt very much, not because they can't, they don't want to, but the fact is that they don't have the capacity to control. They are themselves being hit by ISIS-K, Khorasan. Now, occasionally you see the bomb blasts that's happening. So the world is now trying to, in my view, trying to strengthen, take care of the humanitarian issues, and trying to see if Afghanistan and Taliban can follow and, work on the red lines that have been laid by the international community, like the equality, same opportunity for women, education, this, that. But, we cannot be naive. We have to be realistic and believe in the real politics of the time. It is goodwill of India that stands there. Afghanistan, even Taliban has admitted to India's assistance, and they want India to come and work on those projects. So we have to see how it goes. Of course, security remains very important for our own personnel. If Indians go there and they get hit and all, you have a problem in the country. So those are the issues that we need to work together.
Thank you, sir.
One more.
Sir, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Sir, how do you see SAARC progressing from here? Because it seems that the government of India is also now more interested in other groups like BIMSTEC or BRICS or Quad, which we have seen in recent past. So how do you see that SAARC progresses from here?
Well, I think that SAARC can progress much faster, much quicker, if there is a normalization of ties between India and Pakistan. That is, my view, one of the biggest drawbacks to the SAARC's further growth. Otherwise, it will continue as it is, but then the internal trade is less than 5%, which is the lowest in any regional blocks there. What I see is that if Pakistan does not abdicate terrorism or cross-border terrorism as preferred policy, I think that chances of India-Pakistan normalization relations are rather limited. And therefore, it will have a great impact. Because you know that for last several years, we have not been able to have a summit, SAARC summit. That was supposed to be in Pakistan, and that was cancelled because of the same issues. And thereafter, of course, pandemic has happened. But if the SAARC summit for some reason happens, And I believe that there is a little hope if Pakistan really shows the international community, because it's under international pressure also to abide by that. Now, in that context, what India has been doing, you rightly mentioned, I also mentioned that about the BIMSTEC, which is there, which has been picked up again, the BBIN and other groups, but they are not the replacement of the SAARC. It has to be a holistic SAARC. Either you have some group, maybe some of, I was talking to one of the former foreign secretaries of Bangladesh, and he was saying that, what do you think about a group which could have minus Pakistan? Is it possible? Now they are also thinking, okay, could we have a group which is minus of India and minus Pakistan? I mean, see, so all kinds of options are going on there. And Quad has nothing to do with it, of course. But at the same time, our problem also can be seen in the context of China, because China wants to become a member of the SAARC as well. And if it becomes a member of the SAARC, then you have the Sino-Pac axis operating on the high table. So I believe that we have to continue on the bilateral track, regional track, and sub-regional track as far as India's foreign policy is concerned. So we'll have to carry forward with all the three options. And as and when things mature between India and Pakistan, I think that we will see SAARC moving much more faster than otherwise.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
We have also received 3 questions in our chat box.
Yes.
So, Professor Sudhanshu Dubey is asking that, in your opinion, what are the changes which are being observed by you as a diplomat in the behavior of our neighboring countries after 2014?
Well, as you know, the neighbors are a gift of geography, and you have no choice but to live with them. And so India's policy has been, as I said, asymmetric relationship and non-reciprocal relationship. Now, when we are providing market access, huge quantities of assistance, largest assistance is provided to our neighbors, billions and billions of dollars by India. And how are we going to leverage that? We only wanted from these countries that any actions or any groups that work against India's national security interests are defeated there itself, or they do not allow their land to be used against India. This has been one of the major expectations of India throughout with all the regional countries, including with Pakistan. But that is not the case. We have seen that happened in Myanmar, that has happened in Afghanistan, that has happened from Pakistan, that has happened from Sri Lanka, that has happened from Bangladesh. There have been these groups that have been present, but Bangladesh to a great extent has reduced it. So have other countries. But as I mentioned earlier, the change that I'm seeing is that our neighbors, apart from SAARC as a regional thing where most of them agree, the neighbors have become equally smarter. What they're trying to do today is they understand India as you know, the big brother syndrome. So they feel that India is a big brother, and they try to push sometimes. And we have done so in the past, which has backfired on us also, in Nepal especially. We have seen that blockade in 2015 was the worst thing that could have happened, frankly. And that's it's not the political leadership that one should be worried about. You should be worried about the grassroots reality and the discontent on that kind of a thing, because every country, people are proud. They may consider you as a friend, a relation, or whatever it is, but they have an identity of their own, which is what they try to preserve, even if they are weak, they are small countries. So we have to be very, very cautious in our approach on that particular dimension. Same thing in Sri Lanka. So what is happening, what I'm witnessing is that China, as I said, is playing this, in this BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, or whether it is in its creating constituencies in these some of these countries, like Maldives, for example, is a case where earlier it was Chinese influence. The next government came; they were very pro-Indian. India paid off their debts also. So it is becoming a checkbook diplomacy in my view, because all these countries are trying to leverage one against the other. Of course, our friends don't want to listen if you tell a a Bangladeshi or a Sri Lankan or a Nepalese, they will immediately try to defend, no, we are not playing one against the other. But the fact on the ground is that they want benefits from both, don't want to be taken for granted by either. But then they have to understand, because with India, at least, they have these age-old connections, historic, cultural, everybody, all these 6 countries. China, though neighbor, but still, I mean, they don't have the same kind of emotional connectivity in the region. So that's an advantage that India has. But at the same time, we can see this, that some of these countries, especially today, I would say our relations with among all the neighbors, if you were to put it, the closest, I would say it's Bangladesh and Maldives, among all the 7 countries. Nepal plays the trick, Sri Lanka also trying to continue to play the trick. But this is going to be the reality. Now, how do we contend with that reality is the bigger challenge for the foreign policy establishment today.
We also received 2 questions from architect Ayushi Jurani.
Yeah.
She's asking that since India is a developing country, what do you think we as citizens should do on grassroots level so that our country is recognized more? And second part of his question is that how can the students be involved and given the experiences and opportunities related to foreign affairs?
Well, number one is, a country is only not geographical entity, but it is known by the people. And Indians are today respected and regarded across the board, anywhere in the world. And that is because of many of our achievements of our people. For example, in the ICT sector, you are treated as an acknowledged power in the world. That is your USP. That is what we have to do. Emerging as the 3rd largest economy is one of the biggest USPs that India has. Emerging as the one of the largest markets in the world, that is what is India's USP is. Being the largest functioning democracy despite ups and downs and discontent and other problems, it remains a functioning largest democracy in the world. That is our a history, a civilizational heritage. That is what we have. So the people to people connect in that sense, whether within India, outside India, we have to overcome those through the largest of our cultural heritage that we have. I think that is very important. And for that, interactions among the SAARC countries, whether it is university to university, institution to institution, travel within the countries, youth organizations should be meeting one another. I know in every country there are various youth organizations like yours. You are celebrating SAARC Day. There are also, I have spoken to some in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and all that. So connectivity with those people, with our youth students would be far more. Today, it is much more easier in the age of social media. It is so much easier to connect people with the Facebook or other media platforms and then carry forward, because that's something that reduces the level of ignorance about one another. And that's why it's important. And if the people P2P connect is stronger, I think at some time this will add to the political relations becoming more stronger. So that is something important. As far as the foreign policy is concerned, yes, you are absolutely right that whether it is our media, whether it is, we have been like Pakistan, we have also been very centric. Only major news that is covered about Pakistan all the time and China nowadays. And most of it is negative news. Positive news, you barely see that. So the media's role in that sense needs much more honing up to do. They don't give so much importance to the foreign affairs. So what has Foreign Affairs Ministry done? Let me just try to tell you. People like us who are retired ambassadors, we are sent under distinguished scholarship program to speak to the students of politics and others, address universities. Every diplomat is asked to adopt schools in their states and go and talk about the foreign policy in the simplistic terms to the school-going children to inform them about what is happening. And then, of course, the social media nowadays is being used much more effectively to reach out to a very large number of people. Is it enough? No, much more can be done because people have to be part of it. After all, the foreign policy of a country is a reflection of its domestic policy. and it works for the development of the nation. And therefore, the nation needs to know what is being done. They need to appreciate, they need to be partner in it. So I think that it can be done much more. Of course, today there are many organizations, think tanks, who are also taking up these cudgels. I know that there is something called IMON, the Model United Nations. So they are on, they take on various things, doing in different schools. But a concerted approach, I think, is a must. And with people becoming far more media savvy, becoming far more inquisitive about the foreign policy issues, I think it can happen over time. But for the time being, these are the efforts that have been made to reach out as far as the foreign policy issues are concerned. You can always visit the External Affairs Ministry's website, which is very, very useful. It's in different languages also. Similarly, we have various capacity building programs. Actually, you can host it in your institute, people coming from different countries for training program. If you have special programs, you can always register with External Affairs, offer that you will be able to provide training to those. So this is how I would say that this can work.
Thank you, sir.
So I have a question.
Yes, please.
What, in your opinion, would be the impact of a slogan, Ghar Wapsi, on SAARC?
Well, it's not a slogan, I think, related to more like CAA that came out. My personal view is it was unnecessary, because under the Citizenship Act, we can give to anybody we want to give the citizen. Secondly, India has been a country which has hosted refugees for centuries, actually, from every religion. Whenever they were persecuted, they have come to India, they have lived. We have seen in the Bangladesh war, millions of them had come to India. They still are living, many of them here. But no country wants its own demography to be changed, because more so the politicians. So I think that the Ghar Wapsi is something that is that I would say a very charged slogan, right? Whether you call the Hindus or Sikhs coming from Bangladesh or Afghanistan to India, or the Rohingya Muslims going back or sending them back, those are the kind of things that remain very charged, and they will remain contentious. So I think that India is known for its tolerance, it's known for its secular credentials, and those are the ones that need to be respected at the grassroots level by everyone. Because the beauty of India is that it has grown its diversity, and it continues to grow in its diversity. So short-term myopic political objectives or some individuals' utterances have a negative impact on it. So the governments have to be very, very cautious and careful. For example, I tell you one thing, that if someone talks loosely or attacks Muslims, you have a very big constituency in Western Asia that gets affected with it. Today, they have understood that they respect India because India remains, has those credentials. But when a small news today, that is may not be the true news today, there is such a prevalence of fake news that anything can be just converted, and it gets repeated, and it gets retweeted and whatnot, and that causes a major problem at the social level. And that becomes a very major. So with the growth, with the media, with new instruments of communications, what we are seeing is also a greater problem in governance as well. So I think that is where we need to plug those to a great extent. And that is the responsibility of the government and the people together.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, I think there are no questions. So I now request Architect Vishal Yadav, Director, SBIA, and Coordinator, Cultural and Literary Committee, to propose a word of thanks.
I would like to express our sincere thanks to today's chief guest, Ambassador Anil Trigunath, for his wonderful session and informative session. Thank you so much, sir. It really extended boundaries of knowledge to all the participants. I would like to express my gratitude to Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Upinder Dhar for his constant support, guidance, and motivation. I am thankful to all HOIs, HODs present here. I further extend my thanks to all participants, maybe teachers, maybe students, all those who attended today's session. I must appreciate hard work done by co-coordinator of Cultural and Literary Committee, Mr. Premansh Sharma. I further appreciate work done by our team members, architect Abhijit Kulkarni and Dr. Anu Ukande. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you one and all for joining us, spending your precious time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you. Take care. All the best.